It was a quiet afternoon at the bustling airport. The hum of the terminals and the occasional crackle of the loudspeaker blended into the background as passengers wandered through the gates, eyes glued to their phones or deep in conversation with their travel companions. Maya Williams, CEO of Williams Tech Innovations, stood near the check-in counter, her eyes scanning the flight schedule. She was excited for her upcoming keynote address at the International Tech Summit in San Francisco. This was a prestigious event, and for Maya, an opportunity to showcase her company's groundbreaking work in AI and robotics. As the first Black female CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, her presence at such a summit was not only a professional achievement, but also a personal triumph over the barriers that had long existed for women and minorities in the tech industry. Maya had always prided herself on her resilience. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, she had faced the subtle but ever-present sting of discrimination. Her achievements, she knew, were not just for her, but for the countless women and people of color who came before her, who had been told they couldn't reach the heights she had. But today, despite her hard-earned success and the privilege that came with her title, Maya found herself facing an issue that would rattle her composure, one she never imagined would happen on a flight of all places. After completing the check-in process, Maya was handed her boarding pass with a polite smile from the airline representative. But as her eyes glanced down at the seat assignment, her heart skipped a beat. The seat marked on her boarding pass was in economy class. She knew something was off. She had booked a business class seat months in advance, a necessity for her long-haul flights to ensure she arrived rested and ready for her engagements. Maya glanced up at the representative, hoping for a quick resolution. "Excuse me, there seems to be a mistake with my seat assignment. I booked a business class ticket," she said, her voice calm but with a hint of concern. The representative, without missing a beat, responded, "I'm sorry, ma'am. The flight is overbooked, and there are no more business class seats available. You've been assigned to economy." Maya's brow furrowed. Overbooked? She had traveled this route several times before and had never faced such an issue. As a frequent flyer and a business class customer, this felt like an insult to her status. "I understand the flight is overbooked, but I've paid for business class. Surely, there must be a way to resolve this," she said, her tone still polite but firm. The representative didn't seem to acknowledge her point. Instead, she shrugged nonchalantly, as if the issue was of no real importance. "I'm afraid not, ma'am. You'll have to take your seat in economy." "It's just a seat," she added dismissively. Maya's mind raced. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about respect. Respect for her time, her status, and the professional commitments she had made. She was the CEO of a leading tech company, and she couldn't afford to be treated like this. She took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. "I'd like to speak with a supervisor," she requested, her voice steady but resolute. The representative hesitated for a moment before nodding and walking away to fetch someone else. Maya stood there, her frustration growing by the second. As she waited, she observed the other passengers milling around, many of them chatting excitedly or gazing at their phones. She knew they couldn't possibly understand the weight of the situation. But Maya was more than just a passenger today. She was a representative of her company, of her people, and of every individual who had ever been overlooked or dismissed because of their race, gender, or status. When the supervisor arrived, Maya briefly explained the situation. She requested an upgrade to business class, explaining that she had a premium membership with the airline and that she was an important business traveler. She made it clear that she couldn't afford to lose time, not just in terms of her comfort, but also in terms of the commitments she had in San Francisco. The supervisor's response, however, was not what she had hoped for. "We understand your concern, but as I mentioned earlier, the flight is overbooked. There are no available seats in business class," the supervisor replied, the same indifferent tone in her voice. "I'm afraid we can't accommodate your request." Maya's heart sank. She had hoped for at least an acknowledgement of her status, a gesture of goodwill to make the situation right. But instead, the supervisor's words were laced with an unspoken dismissal. "It's just a seat, ma'am. You'll be fine in economy. We're all just trying to get to the same place, the supervisor added, flashing a smile that seemed more patronizing than comforting. Maya's frustration boiled over. She had heard that phrase so many times before, it's just a seat, but it wasn't just a seat. It was about recognition. It was about valuing her as a customer, as a businesswoman, as a person. She had fought for years to get to this point, breaking through barriers and shattering expectations. And yet here she was in an airport being treated as though her worth was reduced to the class of seat she was assigned. She stood still for a moment, taking a deep breath to regain her composure. It would be so easy to let the anger consume her, to lash out and demand justice. But Maya was a professional, and she knew that sometimes the best response was not to react in the moment, but to think ahead and act with purpose. She calmly thanked the supervisor, though the words felt hollow, and turned away, her mind already racing with the next steps. Maya retreated to the crowded lounge, where she sank into one of the plush chairs. The noise of the terminal faded as she processed what had just happened. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The years of fighting for equality, for a place at the table, had taken their toll on her. She had worked tirelessly to build Williams Tech Innovations, to prove that a black woman could lead a tech company with grace and intelligence. But this was a reminder that no matter how far she had come, the world was still too often blind to her humanity. She thought about her employees, many of whom had faced similar struggles in their own careers, and about the people who looked to her for inspiration. She had promised herself that she would never let moments like these define her. But today, the sting of disrespect was sharper than ever. Maya took out her phone and began typing a message to her assistant, outlining the situation and instructing them to make the necessary arrangements to delay any upcoming meetings. As she sat there, her mind wandered to the larger implications of what had just transpired. It wasn't just about a seat or a flight. It was about a systemic issue that ran deeper than any single incident. It was about the prejudices that people of color, women, and marginalized groups had to face every day, hidden in plain sight, lurking in places like airports, offices, and even boardrooms. It was about the fight that was still ongoing, and Maya knew that this moment, while frustrating, was another battle in a much larger war for equity. She glanced around the lounge at the other passengers going about their business, unaware of the inner turmoil she was experiencing. In that moment, Maya made a decision. Something had to change, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever been told they weren't enough, that they didn't belong, or that their worth was defined by arbitrary standards. She knew the path forward wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to fight, not just for herself, but for the people who still face the everyday injustices she knew all too well. As the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, Maya made her way onto the plane. The sounds of the bustling airport slowly faded into the background as she approached the gate. Her mind was still racing, consumed by the unfair treatment she had experienced just moments ago. She had expected this flight to be like any other, a routine business trip, a smooth journey from one city to another. But now it felt like more. This wasn't just about a seat or a small mistake made by the airline. No, this was about something much larger, about a system that allowed people to be dismissed, overlooked, and diminished because of their race, gender, or status. Maya's resolve hardened as she stepped into the plane and found her seat in economy class, the cramped space a stark contrast to the comfort of the business class she was entitled to. She took a moment to sit down, feeling the weight of the injustice pressing against her chest. It wasn't just a seat, it was the principle. It was the treatment, the disregard for her rights, and the sense of superiority from the airline that made her feel invisible. Her thoughts raced as she pulled out her phone. With a few swift taps, she composed a message to her executive assistant. She instructed them to alert the press and prepare a statement for immediate release. Maya had dealt with public relations crises before, but this was different. This time, the issue wasn't just about company policies or business decisions. It was about human dignity, about standing up against systemic discrimination. She was no longer just a CEO on a business trip. She was someone who had had enough, and she was going to make sure her voice was heard. As the plane began to taxi toward the runway, Maya felt a surge of energy. She knew what she had to do. With quiet determination, she pressed the call button above her seat. The flight attendant arrived, looking a little puzzled at the interruption. Maya didn't hesitate. "I need to speak with the captain," she said calmly, her voice steady but firm. The attendant, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation, nodded and left. Moments later, the captain appeared in the aisle. He was a middle-aged man, his uniform neat and crisp, his face showing the exhaustion of a long day of travel. He looked at Maya, slightly confused. "How can I assist you, ma'am?" he asked politely, though there was a hint of irritation behind his words. Maya stood up, facing him directly. "I need you to halt the plane's departure," she said, her voice carrying across the cabin. The captain raised an eyebrow, clearly startled by the request. "Excuse me?" he asked, not quite sure if he had heard her correctly. "I said I need you to stop the plane from taking off," Maya repeated, her tone unwavering. "There are serious issues that need to be addressed before this flight can proceed." The captain hesitated, glancing around the cabin, then nodded curtly. "We're ready for takeoff, but if it's important, I'll do as you ask." Maya gave a nod of acknowledgement. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her, but she remained focused, her every movement deliberate and calm. This wasn't just about her, it was about something bigger. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for anyone who had ever been made to feel small, ignored, or disrespected. She waited until the captain stepped away to communicate with the crew, then stood up again, this time with a sense of purpose. She turned to the rest of the passengers, her eyes scanning the room, her voice rising above the hum of murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand why we are not moving until further notice," Maya began, her voice clear and strong. "I am a paying customer. I've been flying with this airline for years, and I booked a business class seat. But I was told that because of an overbooking issue, I have been relegated to an economy seat. A seat that I didn't pay for, a seat that I wasn't assigned by mistake, but because of a systemic problem that treats people like me, people of color, women, and business leaders, as less than. This is not just about a seat. It's about respect." A hushed silence fell over the plane as Maya's words echoed through the cabin. She could feel the weight of every passenger's gaze, their curiosity mixed with apprehension. The captain returned, his face a mixture of confusion and discomfort. "Ma'am, this is highly irregular," he said, his voice strained. "I'm sure it was just an oversight. It's nothing personal." Maya shook her head, her expression resolute. "This isn't about an oversight. This is about the attitude that permeates our society. The idea that people like me are supposed to accept this kind of treatment. I won't." With a calm that belied the storm raging inside her, Maya reached for her phone. A few quick taps, and she had the airline's headquarters on the line. "Yes, I am Maya Williams. I'm on Flight 483 to San Francisco, and I'm grounding this plane," she said, her voice unwavering. "I need new crew immediately. The captain and the rest of the staff are no longer fit to fly this plane. They've shown a lack of professionalism and empathy, and I won't allow this to continue." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then the voice of the airline's representative came through, nervous but respectful. "Understood, Ms. Williams. We'll dispatch a new crew immediately." Maya turned to the captain, who stood there, visibly uncomfortable. "You're dismissed," she said, her tone final. "The new crew will take over. I'll make sure to ensure that your actions don't go unnoticed, but for now, I need you to leave." The captain nodded, a mix of disbelief and frustration crossing his face, but he knew he had no choice. Maya Williams had just taken control of the situation, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere on the plane was thick with tension. The new crew arrived, looking bewildered but professional. They took their places, and the captain's absence was met with a strange silence. The passengers, once apprehensive, began to stir. Maya sat back in her seat, her heart pounding in her chest, but a sense of satisfaction slowly settled in. This was just the beginning. The flight was delayed for hours, but Maya was unbothered. She knew that what she had done would reverberate far beyond the single flight. Her actions had exposed a problem that was all too common but rarely addressed. She had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been dismissed, belittled, or ignored because of who they were. Maya Williams was no longer just a CEO. She was a symbol of resistance, of courage, and of the power one person could have to make change. By the time the plane finally took off, Maya's story had spread. Media outlets picked up the news, running headlines about the CEO who had grounded a plane over a seat dispute. But Maya knew this wasn't about the seat. It was about respect, about dignity, about standing up in the face of injustice. Her actions sparked a wave of solidarity from people across the world. From the business world to the streets, Maya became a symbol of the fight against discrimination. The airline may have been embarrassed by the headlines, but for Maya, this was just the beginning. She had grounded the plane, but more importantly, she had grounded the idea that people like her should tolerate disrespect. The battle had just begun, and Maya was ready to lead it. If you've been inspired by Maya's bold stand against discrimination and the power one person has to make a difference, make sure you don't miss out on more impactful stories like this. Subscribe to expect stories for more gripping narratives that challenge the status quo and ignite change. Join the movement, engage with us, and let's create a future where everyone's voice is heard. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to stay updated with every new story, because the next one could be even more transformative.